And there we are. We are live.
We made it.
We made it. Yes,
Barely.
that's right. Barely by the skin of our teeth. I'm just going to take a second and share the live stream to my Facebook wall. And so, as anybody jumps on, if you would take a second to do the same, share the live stream to your Facebook wall. That would be wonderful. And you have joined us for our live Q&A show, where we spend some time dialoguing and just not even so much answering questions, but just thinking through.
No, we don't have answers.
Yeah, we don't have answers, but we have thoughts. Yes.
We have a lot of
Yeah, we have a
thoughts.
lot of thoughts. That's right. And so we are, this is a show where we take questions or topics that, hello, Annette, wonderful to see you. We take topics that you guys have submitted, whether it's you've asked us personally or directly, you've sent us a message on Facebook, you've sent us an email talking about what do you struggle with, what kind of questions do you have about living this life and following God. And we spend some time here trying to figure out if we have anything to say that would be worthwhile in that regard. And so we go live every Thursday, right around noon, depending on if your car will start or not. Yes.
And it's blocking the car that will start.
And it's blocking.
In the driveway.
Yeah, that's right. So we had, ever since we had our cold snap.
Josh's car has been angered.
My car has been angered.
Ever since it was, minus 17 a couple days
ago.
It
was, that's right.
It angered the soul of his vehicle.
Yeah, it did.
And it has refused to
This has been very,
start.
That's right. It has been troublesome. That's right. So,
can you include skepticism in this? Maybe.
Skeptically, I guess. Well, we are talking about, like she was saying, we are talking about unbelief and doubt, and so.
But Lauren, if you have
more pointed question,
more pointed question or something, if there's something specific that you are because skepticism could be applied to everything. So if there's a specific question you have, could you write it? And then maybe we can do that one next week too.
Yeah, that would be, because it may very well dovetail into what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, because skepticism and doubt are best friends.
It's true. I'm just curious if you have if you're attaching it to a certain part of spirituality, or maybe not. But these are great. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah.
Because the goal is to talk about questions that have a broad application.
Yeah, that are practical, that we wrestle with, right?
We all wrestle with these questions, I think.
That's right.
So we don't even have to pick and choose, but the goal is to talk about topics and questions that are very broadly applied, right?
Yeah, and that
we all kind of struggle with.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, Karen, great to see you. Yeah, that's right. We want to address topics that are personal and relatable. That just getting down to the practicalities of what does it look like to follow God, to know God, and to live this life, right? And to do it in the midst of the chaos and busyness of the modern world that we live in.
And I think, I don't know about you, for me, it's also a bit of the antithesis to this kind of commodified version of church and version of God that has become really mainstream. Where it's kind of like, oh, you're over here outside of the church and your life is chaos and it's falling apart and you're depressed and you're struggling. So come over here and your life will get better. When you come to the Lord, everything it's like this evil spell has been lifted and life is great now. And I think there is some truth to that.
Sure.
But what isn't true is that, you can be depressed on both sides of that. Right? Of both sides of that kind of yard.
Right.
And you can struggle on both sides and you can be sick on both sides and you can have really big questions. You can be hurt.
That's right.
There's so many things. Christianity is kind of in some circles presented as a cure-all.
Yeah,
Instead,
that's right.
And we go look, you'll know that you're really a Christian when everything gets better. When in reality, it's no, you're still broken, you're still a
That's
sinner,
right. Yeah.
but now you have grace
Yeah.
to actually resist the temptations.
That's right.
That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
not that the poof, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's that now you have access to resources
Right.
that you don't have over here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, this is hopefully a way to help
That's right.
give permission to people that, yes, we should dig in and we should ask hard questions, and we don't have to have answers even.
That's right.
We can sit in the mystery.
Yeah.
And in the searching and all of that.
Yeah. You can't reduce Christianity to platitudes.
No, and it's not.
But we do that.
And kind of vending machine
Yeah,
spirituality.
that's right. Yeah.
Like,
that's right. Here, I pulled the arm.
Today I need this.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Doesn't always work.
No, it's not.
But sometimes it works.
Yeah. So that's the hard part about it, is that, and that's what I mean,
think. Probably a lot of us know people who actually did have supernatural healings. I'm thinking of a friend of ours who that we met in ministry school, who was a drug addict, right in Alberta, and he left Alberta addicted to drugs, drove 13 hours, and wasn't addicted anymore.
Right.
God supernaturally removed that.
That's right. Yeah.
Biological and mental addiction from him.
Yeah.
But he didn't remove everything.
Yes.
Like, he still had to work through emotional things and all, like, there was a lot that still was there. But I look at that now, and at the time I kind of thought, like, if God does it for him, why isn't it happening here?
Right.
But now I look at it and I go, having seen the work that our friend did.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. He was completely, radically transformed. And to this day is. Like, it was amazing testimony.
Yeah, that's right.
And now I look at that and I go, okay, yeah, it was healing, but actually what I think it was grace in the form of healing.
Right.
Because it was like he had, like, I don't know, arbitrarily, let's say 9 layers of oppression.
Right.
God took off like maybe the heaviest one and left him with the 8.
Yes.
To walk out with God.
Yes.
I think it was grace in the form of healing.
Yeah.
I've shifted my mindset, and it's not a gift that God gave to him, but withheld here.
Right.
So maybe we all receive our grace, but in different forms.
Yeah.
This is kind of applicable to our question.
It is, yeah, because the question.
This is the reason our conversations can't only be 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. The question revolves around the idea that essentially, to some degree, all of us struggle with unbelief and doubt as it pertains to the goodness of God, in a sense, right? Will he heal? Absolutely. Will he provide? Will he provide peace in the midst of chaotic circumstances? Can I find my way back to a place of joy? Those kind of existential questions about ourselves as it relates to how we relate to the Father. And there's so many layers to that particular topic, right? Because in one hand, we have to deal with the practical experience and the circumstances we find ourselves thrust into. But then we also have to deal with the way that we've been formed to think about God and who he is, culturally, the time period that we live in, and the kind of things that are emphasized. I'll say this and then say another thing. There's a book out there which has a broader. It's a broad look at the way people have approached the issue of salvation, the issue of atonement. What kind of summed up in the term soteriology, what Jesus accomplished on the cross.
I don't even know that word.
It's a fun one. Yeah. But basically salvation. And the term itself, the book is called Christus Victor. And it goes through how various different
Latin book.
Yeah, there's a Latin book. It's not in Latin. The title's in Latin. I can't read Latin. The author goes through the different ages of church history and how salvation, the particular bent of salvation emphasized, was in response to the needs of the culture. Right. Not that they were wrong, right?
Right.
But what was emphasized in the Dark Ages was escape from this world.
Right.
Because why? Because people were
That's what people
there was war,
needed and
plagues. That
wanted.
was what they
Right.
needed and wanted. And yes, that is an element of salvation.
Sure.
Right. And so we've got the age that we grow up in emphasizes a particular
Right.
characteristic of the gospel message.
It informs.
It
how we
overemphasizes,
see.
right?
Yeah.
To the detriment of the other emphasis.
Mhm.
And right now we're living in a time where we're starting to see the emphasis of our age falling apart, where it was essentially there was a symbiotic relationship between the American dream and the pitch of the gospel. It was come to Jesus and everything will be better for you. Come to
Right.
America and everything's gonna be better for you, right? It
Right.
was your wealth will increase, your relationships will get better, all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's what was emphasized in our age, because that's predominantly what the culture wanted. And that there is an element of that is true,
Absolutely.
of course, because there's healing and
Yeah.
all that in relationship with Jesus. But that's not the only emphasis of the gospel narrative. And so we've got thoughts that have been given to us about the purpose of Jesus, the purpose of salvation, why we come to him, that are driven by our culture, that are driven by our age, that are driven by our family of origin,
Right.
And ways that we think about God that influence how we see answers to those questions, the doubts about, will he provide for me? Will he heal me? Will he bring me joy? Can I find peace in this life? Those types of things. And
So
then
would it be fair to say we have an imbalanced view?
Yeah, we
of the
absolutely do.
gospel?
Yeah, we
That's kind of
absolutely
what you're saying.
Yeah, we do have an imbalanced view
Right.
of the gospel.
Because we
There's
emphasize one thing, but then we sometimes
de-emphasize something else.
Right.
Yeah,
so
we
the
let go of something else.
scales
Yeah.
of how we see the Lord can be tipped.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we're
Yeah.
missing, we're not considering this other aspect of his nature
Yeah,
that might de-emphasize or make
Right.
this part less intense, or
Right.
to really understand it, we need both sides to be considered
yeah,
because they go together.
yeah. And if you spend your time
Yeah.
dwelling on, say, for instance, the predominant form of emphasis in salvation theology in the time of Luther and then into Calvin
Mhm.
was the legal requirement, the legal justification, because that's what was
Right.
happening in that time.
Mhm.
Society was beginning to rebuild itself. And so
Right.
society was beginning to find structure and rules and regulations
Right.
and
So
law
they looked for the
enforcement and all that
same
stuff,
thing.
right? So you had the same thing.
Right.
And so it's not that Calvin and Luther were wrong, but what they emphasized was based upon their culture, because that's the thing that people were talking about, and that's the things people needed.
Right.
And so if we take that into today, then we might not realize that we're reading into the gospel a particular viewpoint that is predominantly based on something that was happening in the 1400s,
Right.
1300s, 1500s. And so then we see God through that lens, and we fail to see the goodness of God because we see
Right.
the legal requirement of sin and things like that. And all of that's true.
Yeah.
None of those things are untrue. But there is other layers of why the Father reveals himself and who the Father is.
So it's really about recognizing that we all have a filter, probably a few. We have our
Yeah.
family of origin filter, we have our cultural filter,
Mhm.
we have our church culture filter.
Sure.
We have a few. So it's
Yeah.
not so much that you're not saying that's wrong, but it's more realizing
Take a step back.
the
and
filter
pause. Yeah,
exists,
see it's there.
and that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, I go, okay, well, how can I kind of fix that, I guess, or
Right.
adjust? And then I think right away, okay, this is why it's good for me to expose myself to different views.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
let me read books written from different filters
Right.
than what I have, or a different perspective.
Yeah.
Would be a better word probably than that. But
Yeah.
and so, and
Yeah.
even, I mean, I'm not a history person, but you are.
Yeah.
And you have found that very helpful
Sure.
in understanding the different filters.
Right.
And then because you read through it, you actually have seen the different emphasis. So then you know they exist.
Yes.
And you can
Yeah.
read into those and then make your own adjustments.
Yeah, that's right. So you've got the one element is, what's my structured belief system informing me about God? right?
Yeah.
Like what do I think about God? So because a question that says the struggle of is God going to provide may be based on the fact that it's hard for me to see God as a provider based on the system of thought I've been given.
Sure.
Right? As opposed to, is God actually a provider?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the first question that we have to come to grips with is he a provider? Will he provide for us when provision is necessary?
Mhm.
And I may have a theological framework that doesn't incorporate that as a significant element of who he is.
Right. And then culturally,
Yes.
the word provide, what does that mean? Like, I can think of people who provision means a mansion.
Yeah.
And like brand new cars, brand new phones, like a very materialistic view
that's
of
right.
provision.
Yeah. What does provision look
and
like?
I can think of people like our friends in India whose view of provision
is
very different.
Yeah.
It's food to eat every day.
Yeah.
And our house, like many of the houses we live in here, where there's way more space,
yes,
are mansions.
Yes.
So our view of provision is so cultural.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. I mean, even that would be different throughout different regions in North America.
Right.
What is provision? And it would be based on how you grew up.
Right.
Right. Some people grew up in really high income areas, some people
Right.
low income. That's going to determine how you view provision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does that really mean? What kind of provision is God even speaking about?
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Jesus said he was all the provision we needed. What does that mean?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And then it's based on wounding too, right? Like if you, like speaking for myself, these kind of things still, I mean, I have done a significant amount of healing.
Right.
But viewing God as provider still is something I have to work through on different levels because I have trust issues.
Right.
Parts of me do. There are parts of me that are all in, a lot of parts.
Right.
But then there are little pain parts that are still like, no, we don't trust the Lord.
Right.
Those parts are still being brought forward too.
Right.
So we sometimes have inner conflict.
That's right.
That it can be not, it can actually be like quite subconscious.
Right.
But those can also be reasons that we find it difficult to trust, or we find it difficult to accept that God is good all the time. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there's parts of us that are still living in pain that haven't realized the goodness of God.
Yeah.
There's parts of us that have, so they need to be on the same page. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
There's a lot, it's very layered.
It is. It is. I may have grown up in a system that emphasized how guilty I was in the sense of sin, right?
Yeah.
Which isn't untrue. And so I see God as the just judge. Many of us grew up in that system in the evangelical church, that I see God as the just judge. And so when predominantly that's my viewpoint, then I come to an issue of provision, and I know God is the just judge, but do I know him as the provider? Mm-hmm. And so our view of God, our view of the image of God has to be healed.
Yeah. And
then there's also the practical circumstance.
But also, we can't heal it.
No, we can't.
Has to do it.
He does. He does. And so that's why when someone says, I'm struggling to believe whether God will heal me.
Yeah.
Right. And then,
I mean, that's the question.
Do I have faith? Say the question? Yeah. The question is,
Berta's there's a few really good points too. Like Berta says, it took me years to realize God will meet what I need and not want. I mean, that sums it up, right? When you really sit, I've been challenged on that too. It's like, he's not providing. And it's like, well, is he not though? Because do you have a roof? Do you have a bed?
Right.
Do you have food?
Right.
You have the car you need, you have gas.
Yeah.
I mean, that is provision.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't need these other things.
That's right. Yeah.
You want them. And would they make life easier or add like happiness and excitement? Sure.
Yeah.
But do you need them?
Right.
No,
that's true. So the struggle, this person had said their struggle has been with unbelief and doubt for healing from pain, healing, and then for unbelief and doubt with provision, peace, and joy. And so they were struggling with unbelief, and it was like, and their prayer in the midst of that is, God, help me with my unbelief. Right. And so what
unbelief though, in just for context, is he a God can he give me peace?
Yeah. Well,
in the midst of this, can he help me? Can he be there?
Yes.
That's the context of
Right.
the question.
And one of the things, like we were talking about it beforehand, right, is that one of the ways that we think through that is that I need to have enough faith in order to be healed.
He's not a genie in a bottle.
Yes. He's
But
not
don't
a
you
genie
wish
in
he
a
was
bottle.
sometimes?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Actually, funny, Annette goes, it's True Christianity is a book that was written in the 1300s. She said, True Christianity, that's not what she's referencing,
Right.
but that's one of the books I was thinking about that frustrates me about its viewpoint of following God.
Oh,
It's considered a classic in the mystical literature, but it's
Right.
all about the legal
Right.
justification requirement of sin.
And Sarah says provision looked different even in the Bible. Abraham, Jacob.
Yes.
And it's so true, right?
Yeah.
Like Abraham is like Jeff Bezos.
Right.
Basically,
Yes.
he's so written. Then John the Baptist is eating grasshoppers.
Yeah, locusts and honey.
Locusts in the desert,
Yeah,
which we've
yeah.
done. And it was not good.
We have eaten locusts.
They were gross.
Well, they were grasshoppers. They weren't technically
Yeah.
locusts.
And
I think locusts are bigger than grasshoppers.
Makes it worse.
So we did eat grasshoppers in the desert one time. That's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. There's a picture. There's a couple pictures, I think, floating out there around.
Oh, I don't know where they are.
Yes, they're crunchy.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I want to say in regards to that too is that part of either
Yeah.
gross, yeah. Part of the struggle in a question like that, the unbelief and doubt over healing, provision, peace, and joy, oftentimes is hinged upon a thought process that goes something like this: if I just had enough faith, God would come through for me. Right. He would either heal me or
I'm not doing enough. If
I'm
I
not
pray
doing
more,
enough. Yeah. If I
read
prayed
my
more,
Bible more,
whatever it was. Yeah.
Or he's not coming because,
Yes.
all last year I didn't really pray. I
Yes.
said I was going to read the Bible, but I didn't. I haven't. I've
Yes.
missed so many Sundays.
Yeah, I haven't gone to church enough or whatever, right?
Or
so-
even like, it's not always that, but even like, well, it's generational sin. I haven't. What I've
I haven't repented
in the
enough,
past done is I
or-
haven't repented enough.
Yeah.
So then you're sitting there like trying to repent for everything.
Right. Yes.
Blanket repentances, trying to think of things to
Right,
repent for,
right.
and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
Because it's taken in everything about that system and framework, it carries half truths. And what it does is it takes the entire emphasis on the nature of God and puts the entire emphasis on the nature of humanity and the
Right.
fallenness of humanity.
Right.
And so when your focus is on when you predominantly operate from a place of the fallenness of humanity, you're never going to accomplish anything.
And I guess
Because it's not you that does it.
Yeah, what you're really saying is I need to do enough to make this happen.
Yes.
So you've made like you're a mini
You're
God.
the reason it would happen.
You're
not
like
God.
a little God. Yeah.
You've moved centralizing your life around the gospel and Christ, and you've made your life all about you, and you've made it about your deficiency, right? But you haven't made it about his ability. And
You've
so
made it about your ability.
You've made it about your ability.
your lack of ability, but that's still your ability.
And you see people
Yeah.
that have experienced healing, and you don't see it necessarily as a sign that God has healed them.
Yeah.
It's that they had enough faith
Yeah.
so that God responded to their faith, right?
Yeah.
And there is an issue. I'm not saying that there's not an issue of faith, but Lazarus was dead when Jesus raised him from the dead. Okay?
Right.
He did. Where's the faith? Everybody around him is weeping
Mourning,
and mourning,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, they've accepted that he's dead.
They've accepted that he's dead.
In their sorrow.
Lazarus had no faith.
Right.
And frankly, the guy who was lowered down through the roof, Jesus didn't heal him because of his faith. He forgave him because of the faith of his friends.
Right.
Seeing the faith of his friends, he said, your sins have been forgiven. He healed them as a sign to the unbelieving Pharisees. Had nothing to do with faith.
Right.
Actually, had to do with lack of faith.
And what about where he says your faith has healed you?
Yeah, there is
an element.
There is an element. That's why
Yeah.
there's a half truth there.
Yeah.
But so we take one story and make it the story, as opposed to see this broad spectrum of what Jesus responds to, and he sees human need and he delights in bringing an answer to human need. It may not be the answer that everybody wants, because I'm sure the guy who was laid down on the mat What he was anticipating is that God was going to heal him, or that Jesus would heal him. That's what he wanted, right?
Right.
But Jesus saw him and pronounced forgiveness over him.
Right.
He wasn't even intending to heal him until the Pharisees questioned him, and he said, as a sign that this healing is true, or that this forgiveness is true, I'm going to heal him so that you know that I have the authority to forgive him. So the emphasis wasn't even on the healing. So his perspective was, I'm going to bring freedom to the inner turmoil of this young man.
Right.
Not, I'm going to heal him. Healing was the byproduct. So my point is, the emphasis is not on the emphasis is on the need of the person, but Jesus responds in the way that he knows is best for the person.
Yeah.
So you've also got the issue of at the gate beautiful, you've got James and or John and Peter who encounter a paralytic who had said it's been there for some lengthy amount of time.
Yeah.
And he's asking for money, and they say, silver and gold have we none, but take up your mat and walk, right? Well, the amount of time he had been there, and the amount of time scripture says that he'd been there in the book of Acts, Jesus would have walked by that person multiple times, because it's recorded that Jesus went through that gate, and that guy had been there for the amount of time that it says. Right. So Jesus walked right by him and decided not to heal him for some reason.
Well, and we can all, like, to bring it into our own, like, now, I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone when I go, if I look at people I've known or secondary people, right? Like the number of people I've known who've been healed versus the number of people who have not been healed. And I mean, like, from a mental illness or a physical illness, right? I mean, obviously the number of people I know that haven't been healed is much higher. Right, for sure. And some of those people have died from that illness, or children even, right? Yeah. People who you wouldn't necessarily think you can't make it a sin issue. Yeah. And at all, right? It just doesn't work. Right. But it's really hard to reconcile that. Right. Like it is. And I think that's a question that, like, the skeptics that Lauren was talking about look at from the outside and go, how can you serve a God when there's a cancer ward filled with children? Yeah. And I understand the question. Yeah. But I don't understand the answer. I mean, I know that we serve a good God. Yeah. Like I have enough faith that goes, I have tons of empathy, and it's awful. Right. And I don't understand it. Right. And I've known people who have, like the questioner has chronic pain. Right. I mean, that sucks. That is a huge burden to bear. For sure. In your life. And it's not just physical, it's everything. And I don't understand why that person isn't healed. Right. Right. And it is a struggle. Yeah. That's why I think it's important to have the conversation. Yeah. Because I think a lot of us, I had a conversation recently with a friend who's kind of trying to figure things out, and where does she think about things with the Lord? And that was one of the topics, was suffering. Right. And why does he let it happen? But I guess the other side of it that we don't consider is we don't know the consequences of everyone being healed. No, we don't. And maybe sometimes, it's the type of thing that looks good because we want it. It's like when maybe this is a bad analogy, I don't know, but when Israel demanded a king, and God said, that's not best for you. Right. But it looked good because it would give them security, and it would give them structure, and it would give them legitimacy, direction, all of that. And so they demanded it, and they got Saul. Obviously didn't go well. Right. They thought it was right. It was logical. Right. We also know God isn't logical. Right. And we see in a mirror dimly. Yeah. We have such a small view. Right. Of the world. We're like a blip. Right. Yes. And so maybe everyone being healed isn't actually the best. I don't know. I don't have a good answer. These are just thoughts. Well, maybe other people can connect with, and I go, but then what about the pain, the actual pain? Or what I want to do in addressing a question like that is take the emphasis off you not being enough, and you not being sufficient, or you doing something wrong that earned that chronic pain.
and or some, or you not having enough faith, so God won't look upon you or anything like that. I want to get those thoughts out of the way.
But then what are we left with, right? Because it's still that person having
Yes.
to bear that burden.
Yes.
And so you can't deny the fact that
Right.
I don't have that burden, but they do.
Yes. Yes, but there's a difference
Right?
between
I understand
struggling.
Get the emphasis off, but you're still.
Well, there's a difference between struggling with God over why he hasn't and believing that I'm the reason that he hasn't.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So I want to get you away from thinking I'm the reason he hasn't. I have unbelief and doubt, so therefore he won't heal me. Right.
I thought God was logos, and I thought it meant logical.
Logos,
spiritual logic.
Yeah. The term logos does not mean logical.
No.
The term logos means the expression of thought as it pertains to the depth of a thing. So it doesn't just, we would get the term logical from the word logos, but logos does not mean logical. And the word logos, and this is a total side note, the word logos in scripture is a loaded term, and that term logos had been used, because that's the term, for anybody that doesn't know what Lauren is referencing, that's the term that John uses in John 1 very significantly. That's the word that's translated as Jesus was the word. He was the logos. That word logos is a philosophical term that is loaded with centuries of meaning when John pulls it up and uses it. So it's not just a simple, logos means logic. Logos meant the ordered creation of everything. Like Greek philosophers have been talking about this, Hebraic philosophers have been talking about this.
Right.
The logos was something very specific that had been defined over hundreds of years. So it's what she's responding is, you said something like God's not logical.
Yeah.
And I would probably rephrase that and said God operates on a higher logic. Well, something that we don't perceive and understand.
Well, and when I say logical, I'm meaning like in philosophy,
human reasoning.
Logic is an equation. Yeah. It's a philosophical equation. That would be, it has its limits.
Yeah.
God doesn't have those same limits.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a verse, but it's like right here. It'll come to me.
Just picture me standing on the other side of you telling you what it is. That'll probably help. So that's the struggle.
Our ways are not God's ways.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the verse.
That's right. The struggle, I don't want the struggle to be about I haven't done enough, so God
it's
won't
not us-centric, right?
It's him-centric. So now you can struggle with God. Why haven't you done this?
Right. Yeah.
But you're not struggling with your own self-deficiency now.
So really you're saying like we
can still struggle with that.
We want to be entered into the unconditional love.
Yeah.
That almost I feel like has lost some of the weight because we use it. It's become such a common, God loves you unconditionally.
Right. Yeah.
And it's been kind of like,
right.
But if you really sit in that, then that can't coexist with, I don't have enough faith.
Right.
I did something wrong. I didn't read my Bible enough or whatever.
Right. Like I was talking with a friend the other day about the dark night of the soul. And I was describing the time that I significantly went through.
Right.
In that excruciating period, right? It's a very difficult period to go through.
Yeah.
And I was talking about when I started to come out of it, I remember I was teaching a class, and one of the topics that had come up in the teaching notes that we were referencing was the dark night of the soul. So I was talking about the dark night of the soul. And as I was talking about it and teaching through it and referencing the notes, it dawned on me that I had just been going through it. And I was overwhelmed with the goodness of God, that he loved me enough to baptize me in that difficult season to prepare me for my destiny. So I was like, oh my goodness. All of a sudden, in the 2 years of excruciating wilderness, God, where are you? I can't see you, sense you, touch you, feel you, whatever. Right. That was really hard, right? But at the outset, or not the outset, at the end of it, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what you were doing all along. You were forging within me a different identity, a different sustenance that I would live off of, a different resolve to follow you. And I had this deep appreciation for that
Right.
difficult season I went through, right?
Well, and you had, like Karen is saying, we need hope. Yes. And what I hear you saying is that's what you found a hope.
Yeah.
And the hope was in knowing you had a destiny.
Yeah.
And that this had to be a piece.
Yeah.
In order to get here.
It made no sense.
This.
It made no sense in the 2 years, right?
But it was a part.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. So that's the hard part, is that when we look at our life, we look at it from such a now perspective.
Yeah, because we don't know the future.
Right, because we don't. Yeah, that's right. And there's a valid critique on the frustration right now in I think what motivates a lot of prophetic ministry today is the fact that we don't know the future, and it terrifies us.
Oh, for sure.
And so let's prophesy the future as much as we can, even though they're wrong all the time. We feel like we have some control over it now that we see it being prophesied.
Yeah,
doesn't make a difference what the word is. At least I have something to hold on to.
There's parts of us that don't fully trust.
Right.
And that's where I go, it's the inner conflict, because it's not that we don't trust.
Right.
You can't say that. But
Right.
there's these little parts of us that are like, this, I'm really insecure.
Yeah.
Don't like this. What if the borders close? Like, ooh, it
Right.
makes us feel insecure.
Yeah, that's right.
And not insecure insecure in the sense of like no security.
Right. Right.
What if the country falls apart? What if there's no food on the shelves?
That's right.
Like all these things that have kind of come up the last few
That's
years.
right. Yeah. I love what Sarah's saying there. She says someone with pernicious anemia, I almost said amnesia, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, pain, and tired. God didn't do this to me. I didn't do this. Some of this is genetics. Part of it's fallen creation. He doesn't rejoice in my suffering. It's not Sarah's cross to bear that God has given to her to humble her and draw her close to him. But I use it to bring me closer to him. He's not afraid of my emotions. I find also finding others who are farther along in the same or similar journey who will listen and wrestle and pray. Yeah, it's really helpful.
Yes.
Weep with those who weep. Yeah. Exactly, because something in that,
absolutely,
something in the midst of suffering, and again, like Sarah said, it's not like suffering is the cross that God, and this is some of the old language that people have. Suffering is the cross that God gives you to bear.
Or it's to give you, this came up in my conversation before, it's so that you have a testimony.
Right. Yes.
Your testimony is that you got saved.
Yeah, that's right.
Period.
Yes.
Your testimony isn't
suffering.
This happened to you so you could get something.
If you think about this, okay, think about the fact that every single day someone dies that has not known the Father.
Yeah.
Right. And the Father reordered all of creation around introducing every single living soul to his goodness. Yeah. This is John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. That he did. That's a love that comes from an eternal perspective, not a love that comes from, well, he loved the world at the time that Jesus came in John 3:16. Yeah. Right. So the eternal suffering of the Father is that every single soul that dies without the knowledge of him is a terrible heartache, because that's a child that never turned its affection to him.
Lost,
right. So he suffers
his creation.
He suffers daily because of that. And he also rejoices daily. Like it says, when one sinner turns, all of heaven rejoices, because the Father's rejoicing. Yeah. So you also have that as well. But my point in that is that when we suffer, we come into contact with something God experiences on a level that we couldn't even fathom. Mm-hmm. And so suffering actually introduces us to a sliver of who he is. And that doesn't mean that he gives it to us, but it means that I can learn something of him in the midst of it. Right.
Well, and Jesus
is a demonstration
when
of it.
He took on the form of humanity.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So there is something deep that transpires in suffering, but we can't say, well, this is just how it is, and this is just how it's supposed to be. So I love Sarah's perspective on that.
Yeah, that is really beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
I guess too, Jesus demonstrated multiple types of suffering in that short time frame, right? He had betrayal from that would be psychological suffering. He had emotional suffering with the Father. Yeah. Bartering, or like
right.
If there's a way to do this different, right? And then, of course, obviously physical suffering. Right. And he bore those all together. Yeah. Right. And those are the three kind of types of suffering we endure. Yeah. Sometimes separate, sometimes together.
And there's a just a side note to that, because I'm going to nerd out for a second. There's a theological term called the Communication of Idioms that's employed by the early church fathers. And the Communication of Idioms was a theological standpoint that said anything you can say about Jesus' humanity, you can say about his divinity. And so both of those, because they were united, right? And so in one person, you see the divinity and the humanity fully on display, both 100%. And so, so when you say something like Jesus suffered, you can say God suffered, right? When
they're not distinct.
They're not distinct. It's not, well, as a human he suffered, but as a God he didn't suffer. No, anything you say about what he experienced as the Son of Man, you can say he experienced as the Son of God. And you can say that God, one of the really controversial statements that an early church father made, very orthodox statement, but it really rankled some other theologians.
Rankled.
Yes. That's a good one. I was actually reading a historical book where the author used the term higgledy-piggledy, the translation into English anyway. That's amazing. And so what he said, that you can say that God nursed on the breast of Mary. And so that really offended some people who were like, how can you say that about God?
It's true. It
is true. I know. But we know it's true because they argued about it and came to fisticuffs. But anyway, so what you say about when we see the image of the suffering God, we can say this is a picture of the divine nature. The divine nature suffers on behalf of humanity. And so, yeah. Well, we're 41 minutes into this. And yeah, one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is long suffering or patience. What is meant by
partaking in the
sufferings of Christ. Great question, Lauren, and we're going to add that to the list of questions that we'll address. We're just going to take a second. This is the part where we look and see if there's any prophetic things. Oh, remember we do that? Yeah. No, I forgot. Well, because we could just keep talking about this, and I love the conversation that's going on. That's going on in the comments here. Berta says the question I ask myself now is, how can I see God in this experience that I'm going through? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have to attribute him as the author of the experience.
One of my favorite, I used to listen to Graham Cook quite a lot. A long time ago when I would go running and I would just listen to some of his sermons. I think it's pre-internet and pre-podcast.
Right.
And one of my favorite things that I still to this day fall back on a lot is when something hard or bad is happening in your life, he started asking himself the question. He'd be in this horrible situation and he would go, what in this situation, what aspect of God does this situation allow me to access that I wouldn't have seen or accessed else like otherwise?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so that has helped me a lot. Right. And I love that it's not based on me and what I'm doing, right or wrong in it.
Right.
It's totally based on understanding how vast and huge the nature of God is.
Yeah, that's right.
And that it's so much bigger than me.
That's right.
And so what part of God do I get to see?
Yeah.
Through this situation, that if this situation never existed, I might never see this part of who he is.
Right. That's right.
That has brought me a lot of comfort and then peace, which has helped me to access wisdom.
Right.
In those difficulties.
Yeah, that's right. So I've got.
You're doing something.
Yeah, I am.
Canada needs to be
smaller. Coffee, double tater tea.
Yes, Sarah.
Yes, nachos and guacamole for John. You don't get the guacamole, though.
I will just steal it, actually.
I just had a picture for Annette. So if you've got something you can share. But it was just as I was scrolling through the names and looking at who was commenting. So I had this picture for Annette where, Annette, I saw you journaling. And I just felt like there was something about, something profound was going to come out in times of writing. It was like you were writing, journaling, but there was something more intentional about what you were doing and something something beyond just like, writing fluffy things. But I just felt like this is an earth-shattering word or anything. I just felt like God was going to show you some things through the issue of writing and journaling that would be very helpful for you and very helpful for others as well. So you're sitting down at a desk and writing, and God meeting you there, and the stuff that was coming out during your writing was insightful and profound, not only for you, but for others as well.
When I look into the journal in your picture, I see big red droplets coming out of it.
That's an interesting thing this is as you're thinking about that, I just want to make a comment on prophetic ministry.
Right.
How I had a picture.
Right.
And then you have more of the picture.
I just looked into your picture.
Yeah, I know. And that's
right.
a thing. So just so you know, that's a thing.
I stay away with anything made with avocados.
I do not. I run to things made with avocados. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just felt like the red was healing. That's what it represented.
Right.
And I think it just is like, it's going to nurture some of your own healing, but then that's, that is something then that you will be able to encourage others and pass on to other people.
Right. Let's see. Anything else?
No. I'm distracted by your
what
link
I'm doing.
Sharing. I don't know what you're doing.
Let's see. No, I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. Oh, here, let's do this. I'll get that. And
I'm just want to say thank you to everyone for the engagement, for the comments and the questions, and that is really nice. It feels like as close as it can to having an actual conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's Karen. I love that, looking into the picture of the prophetic word. That's oftentimes that will happen as you're flowing with others, and especially the more familiar you are with the people that you work with. You'll see things in a picture that, oh, they had that picture. I see that part of it. I've had that happen a lot. So I don't have anything else if you don't.
Yeah.
Okay, before we end, because we're going to end in just a second, we have 2 events coming up that I want to let you know about. The first one is an event that we're doing next weekend. That's January 21st and 22nd with 2 very good friends of ours, Murray Dewick and Ron Huxley. And that event is called Becoming a Non-Anxious Presence. And I think, I'm going to put the link into the chat there so you can see the comments. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. That's going to be a fantastic time together. Ron is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Mm-hmm. He's an awesome, awesome guy. He's going to talk about how we deal with trauma and how trauma impacts our level of anxiety and our level of peace, and how it informs who we become, and how to recover from trauma. And then Murray brings such a rich appreciation for life in God and walking with God. And so we're going to talk about all kinds of things pertaining to what it looks like to be a people of peace and to walk in that, steward that, and to give that away. Especially
Murray is the guy who introduced me to the prophetic.
Yeah, that's right.
Back in 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. Yeah. A friend of mine at a coffee shop that I worked at brought me to this course, and it happened to be Murray's, it's called Samuel's Mantle. And that was my very first foray. I had never heard of prophecy, nothing like that. And so,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, he's walked the walk.
So it will be a lot of fun. It will be,
Bert,
if you can't, I know I would love Erin to come. I
would love to come, but with all our children, it's tricky.
It is tricky. Yeah.
You either need a lot of plane tickets or a nanny.
Yes.
So when you were a baby.
Well, you guys are so my people, and that you're our people. So anyway, take a look at the Becoming a Non-Anxious Presence event. That's going to be really good, really informative. There'll be lots of practical tips, lots of Q&A and dialogue, that kind of stuff. And if you can't make it to each session, the recordings will be made available afterwards. And if you can't afford the registration cost, just let us know. I don't want finances to be a barrier for your ability to attend.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we have coming up, and I'll put that in here, is tomorrow. This is kind of an informal time together on Zoom where we're going to be doing some dream interpretation, my dad and I, and we will be talking about dreams, discussing dreams, just as a group, getting together and talking through the issues of what is it like to know what God speaks to us in the night season. So that's coming up. You have to register for it to get the Zoom link for it.
Yeah.
Because I was told that if you just put a Zoom link on the internet, then people that are in your thing can be hacked very easily. So hence
I tried to start a Zoom call with our graphic designer yesterday, and all I did was open up a meeting with myself. It was ridiculous. I felt so inept. It was just me on the camera and no one else.
That's funny.
And she mocked me.
Yes.
Pretty
Good.
relentlessly.
She should.
Yeah, it was funny.
Yes.
That's a great one to do though. Like your dad is a fantastic dream interpreter, and he's really good at teaching.
Yeah.
He's really good at explaining how you get from dream to interpretation, this whole gap here.
Yeah. So take a look at both of those things. Both of them will be helpful. And you are my persona. Yeah. So as always, it's so much fun to spend some time with you guys. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Next week.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
God bless. Yeah.
Bye.